For more on this, let's bring in Kiron Skinner, Fox News foreign policy analyst, a Tao professor of international relations at Carnegie Mellon University and research fellow at the Hoover Institution. Thanks for joining us today. As we look at this and as the president prepares to meet with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, he has been speaking about the possible release of American hostages, as we saw in Jillian's report, still being held in North Korea. Do you believe North Korea will release those Americans prior to this engagement between these two leaders?
We hope so, because it will be an important gesture about good faith going into historic talks focused on denuclearizing the North Korean peninsula, the Korean peninsula. We have a historical precedent for such efforts. Let me speak about 1983, when Ronald Reagan, at the height of the Cold War, was able to negotiate the release of 7 Pentecostals from Soviet Pentecostals from the basement of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. 1983 was seen as the height of the renewed Cold War, but while there was tension and rhetoric, Reagan calling the Soviet Union an evil empire, and the U.S. placing nuclear weapons in Western Europe focused on the Soviet Union, there was a human rights issue that got resolved. And without it, much of the end of the Cold War story would not have been possible. I think we're at that moment again on the Korean Peninsula.
That's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up, going back to 1983, because of the humanitarian effort that the president then, Ronald Reagan, made, and of course the success of that, and seeing an end to the Cold War between Russia and the United States. I want to play something real quickly from the former governor of New Mexico and former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Bill Richardson, who was speaking to our Neil Cavuto earlier today, and about his sense of hope and even optimism, if you will. Let's listen.
I'm hopeful. It's the best I've seen in a long time, but I worry because I know the North Koreans.
I know the North Koreans. That is still a sticking point and a cautionary red flag, if you will, for many Americans who are watching the president do this diplomatic dance with North Korea. What do you think he has to be aware of going into this?
He does have to be cautious about the North Koreans because of, more than 25 years of failed negotiations and diplomatic activity with North Korea, and the fact that for more than a half century, the two sides, North and South Korea, have been basically in a state of war. But this is a different period because we have a different American president. And nothing is going to move in these negotiations in terms of a firm deal without a very solid U.S. position. And we have jettisoned the strategic patience of the Obama administration with a very firm and directed diplomatic and military strategy that the North Koreans have not seen from an American president at any point
and let's keep in mind,
in more than a half century.
That's a very good point. And let's keep in mind that this president is not a politician, but a businessman who actually touts making the art of the deal. So we're going to find out what kind of deal he will come up with. And for all intents and purposes, he's about to make an historic meeting between himself and the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. That's all the time we have, Kiron. I wish we could talk to you more, because I'd really like to pick your brain on other things. But because of the shortness of our abbreviated hour, we've got to move on. But thank you so much for your insights. Appreciate you.
Thank you.